Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 6 or 7. I'm sure we've done quite a lot of these now, but we are got quite past episode 5 now. Thank you guys for all the support so far with it. And in today's video, we're going to be having quite an interesting discussion, and that discussion is indeed about the elves and how we could see them in the Amazon show. We might shift towards the subject of Lindon as well. But as always, I am joined by my lovely guests. Firstly, starting off with Ken.
Hi.
Hello, my friend. I'm also joined by, as some of you might see on the screen, Mr. Penguin is unfortunately unable to join, so that's probably going to help my comment section out a lot. But in his replacement today, we have got I'm So Bud. Hello, my friend.
Hello.
And welcome to the podcast. And as always,
Thank you.
we have Nikki here as well.
My Govanen Melanin.
Yeah, that's always wonderful. And her links will be in the description below. And also, talking about links, you have TalkingTube as well.
My Govanen.
Yeah, I wish I could say it like that. So, his links will be in the description below. So, as I tend to always, I'm going to start off with Chen. So, the elves. It's such a broad format, and we're going to try potentially narrow it down in today's podcast. So, the interesting first thing we're talking about elves is a split between Eregion and Lindon, and potentially places like Lothlorien and MacLeod, etc., and the Woodland realm as well, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a couple. I don't think there's anything else, but it is mostly, I think, Lindon, which is the kind of high elven. It's the throne of the elves, really. It's the seat of the High King. And there is Eregion, which is an Noldorian realm. So, we don't really see much of the Noldor elves in the Third Age, so they would be kind of unknown to casual fans, but they are very prominent in the First Age. And then there's a possibility for smaller parts for the elves of Lothlorien, maybe also for the Woodland realm. I don't know, but interesting.
Yeah, there's so many different places that we might see more fleshed out in the show as well. And for example, another thing where we talk about is going to be back to the show and the movies. A lot of it is the aesthetic of it, because if it will keep in continuity. And Nikki, do you think that potentially that, say for example, we saw Mithlond in the Lord of the Rings show, and the Lord of the Rings, do you think between the Second Age and Third Age there was much difference between, and if so, should Amazon keep the same aesthetic as the movies did?
I'm not really sure. I don't think they changed much. No. I really enjoyed what they did in the movies, but I think they could expand on it a lot more.
There's always potential to expand, and one thing the movies did not expand on, probably because they didn't have enough time to, was in fact going back to Lindon, was Gil-Galad. And I'm so Bud. Gil-Galad, he's an interesting character. How do you see him in this show?
Oh, definitely a main character. I actually had a discussion with Mr. Penguins about why Gil-Galad could be the main character. He's not only the High King of the Noldor. There's an interesting shift. He's the High King of the Elves in the West, which means that not only would he rule over the likes of Elrond and Celebrimbor, but he would also have authority over Amdir, Orofer, and the Sylvan Elves, which is actually what happens in the Unfinished Tale. We are told that Gil-Galad summoned these.
Yeah, you could say he is the person, like, that's in his name, he's the High King of the Elves. But even though he is the High King of the Elves, would that make him the main character? Is an interesting question, because we still have TalkingTube Galadriel, because I know we'll go to in a bit of Ken, who will give us a great reason why he thinks Galadriel will be potentially the main character of the show. But also we have TalkingTube, as I know you like as well, Celebrimbor.
Yeah, I really do like Celebrimbor and his stories. Definitely do intertwine with Galadriel's in some forms of canon. And it's going to be interesting to see whether or not he's really the Lord of Region, because in some forms of canon he's not, and then he ends up usurping Galadriel and Celeborn's rule there. So it's going to be really interesting to see what's going to happen with him. There's like 5 different ways this could go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
And
think the logical thing to do would be to take the little bits of each version that are most interesting and kind of weave them together.
Yeah, like they could, I don't know, mix the forms of canon where Celebrimbor loves Galadriel and then he usurps her, mix it up like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'd make it interesting. But I mean, the thing about making Celebrimbor love Galadriel is that it's just sort of risky, because it's really hard to pull that off. And, I'm sure nobody wants a Tariel incident again.
you say that might be risky, but what about Anatar and Galadriel that another person has reference to as well? Wasn't that with
Yeah, I think there's a couple of people who want Anatar to be in a relationship with Galadriel or someone else, but I think they're definitely in the minority there.
They can't do that. That would be a violation of everything.
Yeah, and
I
a ton
would
of
not be
people
okay
have
with
been
that.
posting about this, quote unquote.
To be kind of, I would say, like maybe possibly a little bit creepy towards Galadriel. I think that would kind of make sense in my head, at least.
But
Well, there could be an
Sauron
attraction. They could
evil, but,
fall
he
under the
wasn't
spell, but it
possible.
just doesn't make sense that they would have a relationship.
I don't think that would really make sense. I don't think Sauron, being the I knew that he was, would have an interest in Galadriel. I just think that would be a little bit against his divine nature, really.
I think
Yeah.
it would be,
yeah. Okay, that's
And his plan.
Yeah, I didn't expect that to go that far with Anatar. I would probably bet my channel that we won't be seeing something like that. I know online some people might be wanting to see stuff like quote sexy Sauron, but we'll just have to make do.
A ton of people want to see that, but I mean that's almost nothing could be further from the truth. Well, I mean, and granted, he did have a fair form, but sexy is not the word to use there.
Also, as far as we know, most evidence points towards Joseph Moore playing Sauron.
Or Maxine
fine.
Baldry. But yeah, most people think it's Joseph Moll. I think he's still old personally.
It's fine, but it's not the kind of unearthly, alluring kind of.
Yeah, but as this podcast is about, we are talking about the elves. But Anatar, as we know, does have a part to play in that. And we know that one of the big events about that is the forging of the rings. And that mostly takes place in Eregion. So, Bud, how do you think the relationship could be between the elves of Eregion and Anatar? Do you think how we will see that play out in the show?
Well, I hope we'll see how it plays in the show. As for how they do it exactly, well, I think it would be just a remake of how Melkor seduced the Noldor originally in Tyrion. He comes in and there are people who are wary, but the vast majority of Noldor are craftsmen, and when they see Anatar and his knowledge, they get seduced. I don't think they love him as a person as much as they love him as a giver of knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we might see how they make little exciting parts where you almost get to the truth and then you don't because something happens. I feel like they might have separate storylines, not of the lead characters, but people who are suspicious and who are gonna tell or who are considering saying something about their suspicions, and then it somehow gets up, stuff like that, just to keep it interesting. I think they might throw things like that into the mix. But all in all, like, all the main characters are going to be fooled by this. We all know that already. It's already been written, so it's not going to change.
Yeah, and what's also been written is seeing Anatar and his relationship with Celebrimbor. So Tolkien too, that's another thing that we know Tolkien, because in the second age within the show, we know there's going to be stuff that we probably will be new to us, will probably be maybe a bit of a divergence from maybe what Tolkien did, but of course that's going to happen because of the show. But one of the integral things of the second age was Anatar's relationship with Celebrimbor, so just expand on that.
Well, yeah, and Anatar was really trusted by Celebrimbor, even to the point of usurping Galadriel and Celeborn in not yet Lorien, in Eregion. And so that shows how much Celebrimbor trusted Anatar. But that's only one of the ways which they may go, and they might mix forms of canon, as Chen said. But I don't know. I mean, with the making of the rings, we're definitely going to see how Celebrimbor was fooled. And I think that'll be very interesting.
And we're about 10-11 minutes in yet, but the one thing that we haven't brought up yet is Elrond. He was an elf in the second age. He might be a main character, but to be honest, except from being Gil-Galad's lieutenant, Ken, what could we really see from Elrond in the show?
Well, it's just his lieutenant, though, is it? He's his vice regent as well. Like, he's in line for the throne, and I think he'll be like Gil-Galad's kind of statesman, And I think a lot of the Lindon stuff revolve around what's happening in Eregion, and it would be like, well, first things first, I think both Gil-Galad and Elrond didn't trust Anatar. So they'd be like communicating with the people with Celebrimbor, I suppose, kind of warning him off that obviously won't work, and then they'll be kind of trying to maintain this very frail foreign policy, you can say, with the Eregion as it gradually falls under Anatar's spell. So I think Elrond will have, and then of course once the war starts, Elrond is in the front lines fighting. And so I think that there's definitely room for a very big Elrond role, and I think Amazon will center on him quite heavily, because it's not the thing about Gil-Galad as the main character. Generally speaking, in movies and TV shows, you don't make the king the main character. You take someone a couple of pegs further down, just so that he can have this kind of everyman quality.
Yeah, and that is, I'm Zebud. What do you think about what Ken said there, that you don't have to, because that might mean that Gil-Galad might not be the main character of the show then?
It's entirely possible, but about kings not being main characters, well, he's right. Gil-Galad, I would have said Aragorn is a king and he is a main character, but Aragorn's journey is to become a king. But Gil-Galad, in my opinion, is good because he can present you with both elves and Numenor. Gil-Galad is the only mentioned leader who interacts with Numenor. He exchanges letters with the Aldarion, I think, and he participates in the War of Elves and Sauron. I would say he has a better shot than characters like Celebrimbor or Galadriel, because Celebrimbor will die halfway. He dies either to the end of the show or halfway throughout the end of the show, and Galadriel doesn't participate that much. After she gets ousted of Eregion, if they follow this canon, well, she crosses to Moria, comes to Lorien, then takes over gradually. So that's why
Yeah.
Good point, but I think characters like Gil-Galad and Elrond also would make really good background characters. Just because, the leader sort of, I don't know, always ever present but not main character sort of character would be kind of nice to have.
Well, let's not forget that there's many seasons, and each season is going to have a different name, and potentially we could be following different main characters for every season and different storylines that
concept
might
of-
eventually intertwine. So it could be all of them. It would also be interesting to see, Galadriel and Celeborn's daughter. I don't know if I'm saying this. I feel like it's Celebrian, but it could be Celebrian. I don't know.
Celebrian,
It's always
she's the
hard
love
K.
interest of Elrond, so there's that. And then, of course, I would love to see Gil-Galad because, I mean, he is also a big deal in Tolkien's stories. So, yeah, I want to see all of them.
On Gil-Galad,
I'm really leaning towards Celebrimbor being a main character. Even though he does die, I think that death isn't a reason that he's not going to be a main character. It's probably, in my opinion, a reason that he will be. I mean, deaths are pretty dramatic and can even be tear-jerking to some people if executed properly. So, Gil-Galad probably will be at least a side character. He might be a main character too, but I think, in my opinion, Celebrimbor will be one of the main characters, if not the main character. Because so far, and this is only judging from what little we actually know about the show, it seems like it's going to be mostly about all of the races and then how they connect with Anatar and especially the rings. And Celebrimbor is definitely in that middle inner circle there.
Yeah.
And I just want to touch upon one thing from earlier that Thunderbird actually said, because we have talked about quite a lot of places in the show yet, but we haven't talked about in this video yet Numenor, and Lindon and Numenor have that around the middle of the Second Age, have that communication. I believe it started under Tarmaneldo, where Eldarion went on one of his many voyages and sent a letter back to Tarmaneldo telling him about the threat in the east. Do you think we could see that in the show, or is that, do you think, too early? Because it would show, it's one of the early times that we see the relationship between Numenor and Lindon.
I feel like they would have to because any little thing that they can use there would tie those two worlds together, and if they don't use that, and if they don't do that, then they will just be in effect two separate worlds that don't really have anything to do with each other at any point. So then it wouldn't be a point. They could just focus on Lindon or just Numenor. They have to connect them somehow, I feel, for this to feel like, I feel like they could not to base this on Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones did a good job with having a lot of main characters that each got their own 15 minutes in the whatever they call it, the public eye. So you cared about all of them. So when one of them died, it hurt. And I feel like they should be doing that with this as well, because every death in this story matters.
But Nikki, you referenced Game of Thrones there, but one thing they did do is, for the first 4 or 5 seasons, there was hardly any contract between Westeros and is it Essos, the other one, I'm not sure, because I think the storylines of Jon Snow and forgot the other one, Khaleesi, or what her name was, whatever. So between them two, the show Amazon do the same thing, where those two continents hardly ever spoke to each other. They just mentioned each other once or twice. There wasn't that much interaction there. So could Amazon go through that?
Yeah, that's true. They could start with that and then eventually lead to it, I guess. But somehow they have to tie it together a little bit.
They will. I think they will tie together because, Lindon is a maritime nation. It's right near the shore. All of its main cities are harbors to some extent. Numenor is a maritime nation as well. We know that there's exchanges between them. They talk. And I think also, from what we know about what's going on in Numenor around that time, a lot of what's happening in Numenor revolves around what's happening in Lindon, because the queen Numenor, Telperion, she's kind of being this very insular, isolationistic person, which is, reasonably common. It's well-trodden territory for this franchise, I think, she's constantly like trying to stay out of what's happening in Lindon, which would suggest she is in the know as to what is happening.
Yeah, and I'm Ziba. Do you think we will see a relation between Lindon and Numenor?
Well, the relationship wasn't that much expanded upon, but the fact that Numenor comes to save the elves tells me that they must have had some awareness of each other. So, and what Hen said, well, it's true. Telperion was isolationist, but he wasn't the only queen of Numenor. There were others, more expansionist, before and after her, and Telperion comes a bit late. The first one, I would say, who would be isolationist and don't care about Middle Earth would be Ankalime, the daughter of Aldarin.
You do make a very good argument for that, and I also like to think that if there must have been good relationship beforehand, if later on in the Second Age, the Numenorians came to Lindon's aid, because they of course have to build a trust, don't they? But another thing that, yeah, exactly. So another thing I would like to touch upon is, so we have talked about Lindon a bit more, and we talked about the separation between Numenor and Lindon. But then, if they're going to be separate for so many seasons, and Kenya, and you've all said that they have to come back at the end. All these characters have to meet at some point. But what event is that? I can really think of it as the War of the Last Alliance.
Mhm.
And but
Yeah, that's
will
what I
the
was gonna
show
say.
go that far?
Oh, much earlier.
Yeah.
The
Well, it
War
has
of the Elves
to.
and Sauron. The War of the Elves and Sauron is the first time. It would actually be the best one because it's the one where Numenor basically saves Middle Earth. So
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
you could
Sure.
Everything comes together in that. You have, so Sauron destroys a region, spoilers, and the elves of Lorien, the dwarves of Moria, the elves of Lindon, and the Numenorians all come together to defeat him. So it ties absolutely everything together. It's really, it's a very good way to kind of structure this.
Yeah, and the
Very good
Battle of the
climax.
Gothlo, I
Yeah,
believe, is
and
a
if
really
you don't
interesting.
include the War of the
Yes.
Last Alliance, what will the climax be?
It's
you can't
obvious
just
that it has to end
cut
with the
off
War of the Last
climax.
Alliance, right?
Yeah,
I think
But the
And
whole
then
show, not
that's
this
setting up-
season. The
that's
whole
setting
show.
up everyone, all the other characters, perfectly for any spin-off series as well.
Yeah.
I think the
100%.
spin-off series will be
I think the
See?
Second Age has this quirk that it ends with a great showdown that is reminiscent of the War of Wrath, but the actual cataclysmic event that should have ended it was the fall of Numenor. So I would say it should end with the fall of Numenor. Because don't know, it's the audience would be familiar with the War of Last Alliance, but the fall of Numenor would strike minds more. It's the first time, it's the only time they will see Iluvatar, we will see the Valar.
Yeah,
It's very
we've already discussed the whole Valar thing. We feel like, well, the last time we talked about it, showing Iluvatar and the Valar would be a big risk on Amazon's side, considering that they're basically God, and in that world they are the creators of the world. So it would be a very, very
mystifying.
yeah, it
Well-
would be a difficult thing to portray the right way, I would say.
We need to take some reference here as well. I'm not very familiar with any other movies or TV shows which actually show gods.
Yeah.
I guess Game of Thrones.
Well,
I don't think
apart
there's any
from like
gods.
the Greek ones.
Oh,
But the
what
Greek
was
ones
that
are so,
movie?
But they were
Ken,
all too
The Noah
often
movies.
incarnate as humans.
it was
yeah.
it was that ridiculous one which had, it was from years ago. It had like all the Greek gods in it. It was just awful. It was like had Zeus in it and
Wasn't
everything.
Wasn't it Wrath of the
Attack-
Gods
yeah.
or Wrath of the Titans or
Yeah, it's
something?
the Titan, something
Well-
like that. And it
Yeah.
was just, well, he was.
I thought it was cool, but I
it
like
was
the Greek
Liam
mythology. I'm
Neeson.
into it. So
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Liam
love Greek
Neeson as
mythology.
Zeus. It was just
yeah, And
That's a little bit laughable, though. Really, Liam Neeson?
Liam
What's he
Neeson.
gonna get his goddess daughter taken or something?
A big ego enough to be Zeus.
Yes, but in order to show the fall of Numenor, you need at some point to introduce Ar-Pharazôn, to explain what is Aman, to...
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, we're gonna have to see the fall of Numenor. I agree with that. I think that would just not be the end of the show. I think the end of the end will be the Last Alliance, and then the fall of Numenor will happen somewhere along the way, and it will be one of those big cliffhanger things that they do at the end of a season and then continue on. That's what I think. And they will show Numenor and the fall of it, but I also think that they will just insinuate, what happens, not actually show what happens with them sailing on to sort of take on the Valar, but to sort of insinuate it in a way.
Yeah,
And I
you're right.
think
I
that
get your
even though
point.
they won't be showing the Ainur at all, Melkor and Ilúvatar will at least get a tip of the hat, if not a direct mention.
Yeah, for
Because
sure.
you really
More-
can't,
more
if they
of
do
the-
show the downfall of Numenor,
Exactly.
you have to at least mention Ilúvatar. Otherwise, they're going to be like, what? A tsunami just wiped out Numenor? What just happened? This doesn't make any sense.
Of course, they're going to talk about it, but will they show it?
And
Yeah,
the Cult of Melkor, which would
workshopping,
be
yeah,
a lot
exactly.
of fun.
And do you think
Yeah.
we could see a really unlikely start of the show, Warwrath, Melkor flashback? That's of course all about the rights. We don't want to get that in today's one because we still have no idea fully of what they have, because the rights Amazon bought could have changed, but there is all the possibility that we could see maybe a flashback Melkor scene. But I think from this part of the discussion, the overall thing is that it would be unlikely to show Ilúvatar and the Ainur in that manner and showing on screen. It would potentially be a bit hard because often godlike portrayals don't normally work out, unless I'm the body of something else to say about that.
Except for in the
you-
case of Sauron and Melkor, the Dark Lords. In The Hobbit and in The Lord of the Rings, they did show Sauron, and they got pretty creative with it too. There was an eyeball, and then there was sort of a figure in the eyeball. And at one point in Dol Guldur, he was a black mass, and they could do the same thing with Melkor pretty easily, except for the eyeball. That would be a really bad,
No, that wouldn't
really
work.
bad idea.
Well, I must concede that you all are right. Showing the Valar in the Second Age would shock people, because the Second Age is already downward and less magical than the first. But if a day they do an adaptation of the Silmarillion, I don't see how they can squeeze their way out of it. Because you've got things like Mandos appearing before Noldor and proclaiming his doom, etc. And Morgoth. So I would say it's not much about they can't do it, but more about it wouldn't feel right.
Yeah.
That's my-
Well, if they're gonna do like the first age at any point, they are gonna have to do it. But the challenge here is that the Valar are even more beautiful than the elves. Like they are indescribable beings that are. I don't even know how they would manage to successfully portray that in a manner that would be acceptable for, at least for all of the Tolkien fans out there. I don't know, like, not to say that I wouldn't love to see it. I mean, that is my favorite part of Tolkien, is the First Age, but it's, I don't know. I am.
I think it's a long way. If it is at all, it's a long ways away. So don't have to worry about it too much, I think, at the moment.
Exactly, yeah. And
Exactly.
Well, the chances are this show is going to go on for at least the next 5 years, probably more, maybe not, but during the course of the show, we might even see the production of another spin-off, which would be really, really interesting. And that, raises the question of what that other topic would be. Would it be in the second age? Would it be in the first age? Personally, I don't think it would be in the first age. It'd be a little bit weird to do a second age show and then the first age show.
in
would
Pen would
sort
go
of
on the
off-pace
Angmar
it.
War show. That would be a really interesting show. I think they could
That
do.
would be a lot of fun.
Hmm. Well,
On talk of the elves again, moving back to what we were originally talking about, do you guys think we'll see characters like Nimrodel and Nimrodel? I can't even say that.
Amroth.
Yeah, and people like that in Glorfindel. Do you think we'll see characters like that?
Honestly, I don't think so.
Glorfindel
Well, I
we
think
could.
we'll see them, but they'll probably be side characters. Amroth and Nimrodel especially didn't really have that big of a role. I mean, they did, and I don't know. I think Amdir will definitely probably see Amroth. Probably won't see Nimrodel, maybe in passing.
Yeah.
I think, Lothlorien, we aren't really thinking a lot about Lothlorien, but I think it's pretty much going to have to appear because
Well,
it's
it's Galadriel. Yeah.
Yeah, Galadriel at this point
Mhm.
is living there, but eventually Lorien sends troops to help with the situation in the region. So we're going to have to see Lorien, which would be completely unrecognizable, of course, because it's not ruled by Galadriel at this point. It doesn't have the melon trees yet. It doesn't have Karas Galadhon yet. So it's going to be completely unrecognizable. But I think we're going to see it, and in that case, we'll see Amroth because he's the prince of that place. I think.
Yeah. What about Thranduil?
No, that's Ortha actually, King Ortha.
Yeah.
Could be.
Orther is the king at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But we probably will see Thranduil as well.
We
I
could
mean,
even see.
and I wonder if Lee Pace will return.
Ah,
It could be
interesting.
cool.
I could see that happening.
Wasn't there rumors, some baseless rumors about Liv Tyler returning? I think because that we got this covered account. It just what they say is I don't want to say on the show, but it's complete rubbish what they say most of the time. I don't even understand it. But yeah,
Nothing against Liv Tyler or Arwen. I think she did a great job acting, but if they're going to make a cameo again, it should be Elijah Wood.
I also
Elijah
think
Wood is good.
Arwen would be younger at this point. I mean, elves live for a long time, yes, but if they use Galadriel, if Morfydd is going to play Galadriel, then it would be wrong to use Liv Tyler as Arwen, who is supposed to be way, way younger than Galadriel.
Well, Arwen, in all cases, Arwen was born in the Third Age. She wasn't even alive during the event, so.
Yeah, so it wouldn't really make sense. But her mother, on the other hand, and father, I believe we will see, and I'm hoping we'll see more of them, like their actual storyline. Like it's Celebrian. Like her story is so sad, and I would actually love to see it happen. I would love to follow them, as well as Galadriel and Celeborn and Gil-Galad and all of them.
Yeah, and
maybe in a Third Age spin-off.
If they do break canon, it probably won't be with Arwen in the early Second Age.
And going back to Galadriel, you're gone? Can go on, say what you're gonna say.
Oh yeah. Celeborn has a lot of untapped potential because really in the movies and actually in the book as well, his role is it's a cameo almost. We don't know almost anything about him. Doesn't have a lot of meaningful discussions with it's a small role, and so
he's the husband of Galadriel.
Yeah, that's basically all we know. And Celeborn, that's a role with a lot of untapped potential.
I would like the political side of Celeborn as well. I think that would be interesting. But as we continue now, we haven't talked. We have of course talked about Galadriel, but Ken, you always argue that Galadriel will be the main character of the show. So quickly expand on that.
Yeah, it's less. I'm thinking about it less. I'm not saying it out of just the circumstances of the Second Age. More thinking about we have those character names, and one of them, LDN, is said to be the main character of the show, and the description, basically Galadriel, and it was also the role was said to be in negotiations at the same time that just before Morfydd was cast. So all of that thing all of that seems to suggest that LDN is Galadriel, and she's supposed to be the main character. And besides that, there is some logic to putting Galadriel at the forefront. Not so much for the story itself, but just, it is a prequel in a sense. It's a kind of prequel. And, in a prequel, you take a character from the original narrative, you each prequel as their backstory. So The Hobbit is the backstory of Bilbo in a way. And this would be the backstory of, in the prequel sense of it, would be the backstory of Galadriel and Gandalf and Elrond. Besides that, Amazon does have, people are going to be pissed off, but Amazon does have a commitment to diversity. And so having a female lead, that would be attractive to them, I think. So they have a couple of reasons to focus Galadriel, and for casual fans, the Second Age is not a very well-known period. So focusing on a character that people know and love already, again, it's just very for Amazon.
And for another character people know is Elrond. And Nikki, as of course you are also an actress, and I'm not sure if you have any different insights. I know I can probably tell, you have watched Game of Thrones, and Robert Aramayo is probably most likely playing Elrond. What do you think of that casting choice?
I think it's good. Like the original casting as well. Will he looks a little bit like Hugo Weaving, so that really tripped me out at first, and that's, I think, the reason why a lot of people are thinking that he is gonna be Elrond, because he looks like him, and then they switched because he had other plans that he needed to do and therefore couldn't do the show. So I think it'll be a good choice. I think they found a really good replacement. And he's a good actor, and he's talented, and he has heaps of potential. So I think that will be interesting. I hope they make the characters their own instead of basing them on the iconic appearances of Hugo Weaving and Kate. So they take it and make it their own thing, because I would love to see them develop with the characters, and before they portrayed them in the movies, there was no one who really knew how they would be portrayed at all. So just give it a clean slate and start again, and that's what I would love to see.
Talking about starting, go on.
I think they will start a new slate, especially with Elrond, because think of Elrond at this time. He's a completely different character.
Even in the movies, they flanderized him. They changed his personality. Elrond in the book is a character which is friendly, which is homely. I'm not disliking Hugo Weaving's performance, but he was a bit too cold.
Yeah, I get people say that a lot, but I mean, in this time especially, he's much younger, much younger. Especially if Robert is playing him.
Yeah. I think he's colder now than he is in the books in Lord of the Rings. He would be colder as a young general than he is supposed to be when the Fellowship visit Rivendell.
But appearance-wise, he should look pretty much just the same, except for, I think Tolkien usually hints, not specifically with elves, but a change in the eyes. Like with Gandalf, when he returned to Bag End, he did look wearier, but aside from that, his eyes looked a little bit different, maybe deeper, more troubled, stuff like that. And you see that with many different authors. And back to the Galadriel thing, if they do decide to make Galadriel a main character, that means they're going to have to buy the Unfinished Tales. I really don't see how they can make her a character without, including either her thing with Celebrimbor, or rather Celebrimbor's thing with Galadriel, or Celebrimbor usurping her, or stuff like that. All that stuff would tie together some of the main characters really, really well. But if they buy the Unfinished Tales, which it's pretty likely that they already have, we might already see Aldarion and Durindus, and there's also stuff in the Unfinished Tales about Numenor, and tons of other stuff like that. And stuff about Celeborn as well.
And talking about casting choices, I think Simon Morales would be a good Gil-Galad, in my opinion. But I also want to go back on another point, which is that we talked about the clean slate. Should Amazon, aesthetically wise, with the elves, have a clean slate? Or should they, I know Penguin isn't here, but he would be awfully against this and think Amazon should start anew. But should Amazon start anew or keep some continuity with how the elves look like in the movies?
I think they should keep some continuity, both with nostalgia and simplicity. It would just be so much easier, you know? Because nostalgia is a powerful hook for newer people, and I think it would be easier if they were to have sort of an outline on what their aesthetics will be, and same for songs.
They already have sort of too, though. When you look at some of the ones like Morford, she looks a lot like Galadriel. Like when you see her with the blonde hair, and when you really think about it, there are so many similarities. I think they've done a really good job with the casting as it is at the moment. I'm just curious about all the characters that we don't know yet.
Something that would be really interesting is with older characters from The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit returning, namely elves, because that's practically the only kind of character that can return. Like, let's just say there was going to be another series about The Lord of the Rings set 100 years before, I don't know, Bilbo Baggins' birthday party or something like that. It would be really weird if Thranduil was played by Lee Pace, but Legolas was played by Russell Crowe or something like that. You can't replace some of the actors and keep other older actors in.
Yeah.
So the same thing sort of applies to the Amazon series, and it's going to be really hard for them to bring in bigger or even side characters like Lee Pace, who was Thranduil, into the series. It's going to be a really awkward transition if they do decide to do that. And Penguin just dropped in.
Hey, everyone.
We're talking
Hello.
about the continuity, and we know you're awfully against that. So I know you jumped straight in, but talk about continuity. Should Amazon have continuity with the elves, with the movies?
Well, I don't think it's a great idea from a business perspective to try to be in continuity with the existing media. Just if you want to look at it from just a purely revenue franchise perspective, by directly saying that, hey, we are in continuity with the Jackson movies, is a surefire way to diminish your potential revenue potential from merchandising, t-shirts, toys, etc. You're basically saying we're not going to redo Lord of the Rings, we're not going to redo The Hobbit, and so you're cutting yourself off from all of that potential revenue. What I expect Amazon to do, and I just joined, I have no idea what anyone's been talking about prior to this. I kind of think what Amazon would want to do is try to toe the line a little bit, be familiar enough to everything we've seen before that it's not completely jarring, but also be alien enough. And at the time, they can always use the justification that this is, 4,000 years before anything you've seen before, so of course it's going to look different. And then if the show's a success, they'll probably create demand, or at the very least curiosity, for what a long format Lord of the Rings may look like. It's been 20 years since the films have released. Plenty of people have read the books if they hadn't before, and they'll realize, oh, there's a lot of stuff that didn't make the movie. I wonder what that would look like if they had 8 to 10 episodes of 45 minutes to an hour per episode. At least that's my read of the situation.
I also think I fail to see what there is to keep continuity with. Like, okay, like Morford Clark is going to look kind of like a Blanchett, but like in terms beyond that, like I said, Lothlorien is supposed to be at least entirely unrecognizable because it doesn't even have the melon trees at this stage. That's one.
I think
that's one of those minor details that I expect, even if they are, regardless of the continuity, Malorn trees, I don't think they'd include that detail. Yeah, you go into Lorien expecting to see elves living in trees, and you go there and They're not living in trees. What's up with that?
Yeah, sure.
Well, Imladris still
But
doesn't
there's-
exist. Imladris will be built during the show, so that's one. And,
I would love to see it getting
Love
built,
it.
though. That would be cool to have it like you watch it. Because when we see it in the Lord of the Rings, you come into this well-established community, and it's just so magical. But I want to see it get built. I want to see everything from start to end, how it happened and why. That would be fascinating to me. Like communities like that, the elven communities, they're so mythological and so you don't really get to see them in detail at any point during the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit, so I would love to see that.
There's 3 really good ways to have continuity without it sort of being too prominent, in my opinion. And that's with costumes and character design, stuff like that, architecture, and songs. Each of those ways can make a viewer feel nostalgia without overpowering it. Like, I don't know, including Elijah Wood as the main character would be way too strong. Especially, he was a hobbit, so he would not nearly have been born yet. But that aside, there are some ways that they can still establish continuity, especially with, I don't know, Numenor looking somewhat like Gondor, but much more grand, and general things like that. They can have some sense of continuity.
And
Yeah.
costumes, you don't want... You kind of want to continue in the same, I guess, color scheme and with the epic-looking middle-age sort of style costumes. You don't want to go the other way and go steampunk elves, for instance. That would
Penguin, the curved
be a
swords,
little weird.
potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we see a preview and the elves have the kind of really curved, flowing armor that we saw in the movies, if dwarves are incredibly angular, then we'll pretty much say, all right, so they're setting this up as a direct prequel to the movies, which would make me think that the executives at Amazon, who I have to assume are at least as smart as I am, either don't think it's feasible or the potential remake of Lord of the Rings or whatever is be denied to them. But you established a great point. You establish continuity by design, musical cues, and character design.
Yeah, but
And it would be... I wonder if they could ever reuse the Shire theme song. I really don't think they could, but that's something to think about.
Well, we know
which
Howard
songs
Shaw's
they might
involved.
reuse.
No, they would have to make new ones. They can't do that.
Well, I mean, they could, do any of y'all remember exactly the Khazad-dûm Lord of the Rings song? Because there's about
Yes, I love
52
that
or
one.
something. Okay, then do you remember a different one?
Ken
Well,
probably
But the
knows
point
them
is, there's 50 of them that have been playing, and you're probably absent-mindedly aware of them. And
Yeah.
if you play one of those songs, and yeah, the Hobbit theme song, that would probably be a horrible idea, or the Khazad-dûm one, because that is more well-known. But there's 50 songs, so if they just take 10 of those songs and play them, whether it's in the background, because, there's, in my mind, at least 2 ways they play songs, which is sort of in the background music, sort of like you would in a YouTube video, and then there's sort of as something really exciting's happening, the music gets super loud, and then you really hear it, and it's...
Well,
supposed
to be honest, you'd have to have, if they don't have the same composer, they can't really do that. What they can do is use elements of it and put hints of it into the songs, like some of the TV shows we've seen that have done this before. You can sort of recognize a little hint of what's going on, and what they did with Fantastical Beasts and Where to Find Them and Harry Potter, where they took some of it and made it so you recognize that it's from the same universe, but it's not the same song. So
As
I
I
think what they
mentioned
can
earlier,
do...
there's no
If,
Howard
yeah.
Shaw. He hasn't been even contacted yet.
Yeah, that's interesting. Granted, you don't need a conductor till the shooting is finalized and you have this general shape of the show. We hear he hasn't been contacted yet, and that could simply mean they just haven't had to talk to him about this yet.
Yeah, you make the music afterwards. You don't make
Yeah.
it... Well, you can make it during, because the composer should be present to get a feel of the magic of whatever they're creating.
It's very
That's what I think
rare.
anyway.
Well,
I
and
think-
then you can speak more to this than you can speak more to this. Oh, go ahead, Ken.
Composers usually get involved in post-production, usually after the whole thing is already shot. So yeah, it's Howard Shore being involved with the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit from pre-production is very much the exception.
Season 1's going to be finished in June though. So how long is that? February, March, April, May. That's 4 months. So they could potentially contact Shaw in 4 months, but currently it does seem quite unlikely. But go on, talking to you.
Yeah,
He
and
is-
based on the secrecy around it, I don't think he would run out and announce that he's been contacted either. So
He is
Okay.
getting a little bit older, so he might not want to. He might be, I don't know, even thinking about retirement. But even if he's not, there's actually 57 songs. I still think that they could take some of those, if not all of them, except for, of course,
I would
maybe
still
one like the
remake
Shire.
them.
'Cause
Make
that's,
them into
that's what they did
something
with
else.
Lord of the Rings. I mean, sorry, The Hobbit.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
I get the show needs to be its own thing, but I think music is probably the exception, and
Yeah.
definitely they would have to make
Well-
their own new music. But just like with Nikki said about Harry Potter, they did have a new composer pretty much every single movie, and it all sounded very, very, very familiar. Or at least I don't know, maybe that was just me. I didn't notice it. But they can do
Yeah,
the same thing with this. They can mix the old and the new.
Yeah, that's what I would like to hear.
The last 4 movies were different. They changed the composer and he chose the I'm speaking about the Harry Potter.
I think they had this plot on a couple of them. But yeah, they changed quite a bit in Harry Potter. But,
Yeah, when
this
you
is
listen
also
to
different.
Hedwig's theme and to Umbridge theme, and you can't say they are the same person.
Oh no,
Yeah.
100% not. But you have to remember as well, with Harry Potter, the movies got increasingly darker. Therefore, the music also got increasingly darker. Of course, it's not the same person composing it, and you can tell the difference between different composers and their styles. But I still think it worked because they used some elements, and that's what made it work. Yeah.
Yes, but
Well,
that
you
was within
see,
the same saga. That was within the same saga.
well,
As
they
for
do.
music,
sorry.
answering to Talking Tube, if you take the theme of the Shire, everybody will notice it. And like there are, in my opinion, 4 themes: the theme of the Shire, the Ride of Rohan, the Isengard Unleashed, and the Khazad-dûm. You can't use them without everybody saying, yes, this is Saruman, this is Rohan, this is the Shire, this is Khazad-dûm.
Agreed.
Agreed.
But the only one of those they can use is Khazad-dûm because they're going to be using, like, if they have the dwarves, that makes sense. Even if they use some elements, but the Shire would be wrong because there are no hobbits.
That would be wrong. I definitely agree with that. But what's the issue with them, with people noticing the songs? Like with, I don't know, like if you're thinking from a theater standpoint, and I know this won't be in the theaters, but people get really hyped up when, I don't know, let's just say Han Solo appeared in whichever of the most recent Star Wars movies, and like, if the opening scene is a Lord of the Rings song, like with The Hobbit, I think it opens with the Shire song. It might not. It opens with something similar to that, and it sort of hypes people up, like, oh my gosh, this is the Lord of the Rings. This is what I watched 20 years ago when it first came out, or I don't know, 5 years ago when The Hobbit came out, that sort of thing. And they can definitely overdo it, like by using the Shire song, which I don't know how that could possibly be applicable.
Well, I
Although-
don't even know how many of the songs from Lord of the Rings, from Howard Shore, are even really applicable to the setting.
Mordor and Nazgûl.
Yeah.
The
No,
Mordor
I don't know.
thing.
Well,
But
I don't
like,
know
what about
this
after Gandalf's death? That song.
Because
I
let's
think
talk about the
Mordor.
Mordor and Sauron
And-
song with the really high pitched trumpets and whatnot. I mean, Sauron in those movies is a distant, blooming force. In this movie, in this setting, he is an attractive, charismatic, sweet talker. I mean, when will he? I mean, he
Sexy
shouldn't
Sauron.
look hurt. Yeah, sexy Sauron. He should not be scary and intimidating. until the very end of the age. So ask yourself, is that theme the really over the top organs, high pitched trumpets, all this other stuff? Is
Would
that
be a great
appropriate? I don't really think
No, I'm more talking. I'm more talking about Mordor theme for Mordor, not for Sauron. For Sauron, I think they should go with something like that depends on whether we the viewer, are we going to be told that Anatar is Sauron or not. But if we are
Spoiler
going to be
alert.
told, I think the. But
Sauron
if we are
was-
going to be
You
told,
say it
that
after.
spoiler.
You say it after the thing, not you. Sorry, just continue.
yes,
There are plenty.
if they tell the viewer the ring theme, it would be cool. The ring theme is insidious. It's, in my opinion, it characterizes Anatar much more than Sauron and Zigur. If we are going to see Zigur.
That's a clever.
There's also the umpteen songs that Howard Shore also made for The Hobbit. And, he might use those. And even if, let's just say, half of the 57 songs in The Lord of the Rings alone aren't applicable to the series, surely there's still those 20-something that they can use.
Definitely.
I don't know about that, and don't call me Shirley.
Yeah, and I would love to wrap up this discussion now because as you have to go back, unfortunately, to the main discussion, which are the elves. And one thing I think we touched upon earlier was we know about the Galadriels, the Elrons, the Gil-Galads, but maybe more the less underrated characters that people aren't talking about or potentially overlooking. We did mention Glorfindel, I believe, and Celebrimbor. Do you think Círdan the Shipwright could be another one?
Yes, Círdan.
Yeah,
Círdan
absolutely.
should be.
He got one of the rings. What was it?
Narya.
Nenya.
Narya.
Yeah, I know it wasn't Ilya. But he got one of the rings. He has to be in it. If he's not in it, I'll be so surprised. And the only thing that I can think of to say about his character is that he probably won't have a beard. He wasn't all that old. He was still really old, but he probably won't have a beard at that point in time. That was like an entire age before he has a beard in the third age. Maybe he'll have a mustache.
When we see him, I wouldn't be entirely shocked if they don't really focus, highlight the Círdan the Shipwright aspect of him. If they instead make him be some high-ranking lieutenant under Gil-Galad.
I think they should because basically the second age has another aspect to it. It's the age where elves go. It's the only when we see people in the beginning of the Lord of the Rings, we see them on horses going, and Sam tells Frodo that they are going. No, Frodo tells Sam that they are going to the west. Well, in the second age, we will meet Círdan. We need to see the havens, and there is Numenor.
The days of flight are after Sauron is unmasked and he's made the ring, and basically between that and the Last Alliance. So, I think that, element, that temptation to go west may be there, but we probably won't see the flood of Elvis refugees all heading over the sea, at least not until the end.
But as
assuming this is the earlier epoch of the age.
Yeah, but we did know.
Then I don't think people will flee during the war because Lindon is never attacked. Lindon, it's Gil-Galad is threatened, but Sauron never goes as far as Lindon. He doesn't go to.
He stopped.
Yes, Region takes the toll on the full force of Mordor.
We might, on the other hand, see side characters that the main characters care about go over across the sea, just to show that element is there.
Absolutely.
I'm always thinking that it wouldn't make sense for Amazon to introduce at least one more member of Círdan or of the Celebrimbor's his craftsman guild. I would assume you would need at least one other named character within that group,
I should hope there was at least two, maybe more. When you really think about it, in The Lord of the Rings, you see, and in The Hobbit as well, you see the elves, but you see maybe 1 or 2, 3, and then you see some anonymous guards. You never really get introduced to the community of elves. And it's the same in the Lord of the Rings when you visit Lothlorien, when you visit Rivendell. You only ever see a few of them, and you only get to know the main characters. I would love to see a little bit more of a community, that the elves actually are more than just a leader and some gods, you know, and that
Who's
they have
standing around looking
relationships.
pretty.
Yeah, exactly. I want to see more personality within the elves. I want to see them
I have
exist.
this concept, you know, and you guys may recognize this on the subreddit, but when someone was asking, "Oh, what should the moment be like when Sauron, you know, makes the rings and the elves far away hear him speak those words?" And I said something, well, you know, you've got Celebrimbor and the other main elves hard at work on, say, maybe a fourth elven ring of power. And they hear that and they think, oh, crap. And meanwhile, you've got these other elven lords, some important, some less, some main characters, some side characters, some we may have never seen before until that moment, who are wearing what's the other 15 rings of power. Yeah, messed up the math, but whatever. 16 rings of power, and those guys start going crazy because they're wearing the rings that Sauron actually had a hand in. So, you know, some of those should be characters that we liked up to that point, all of a sudden becoming, you know, maybe, you know, kind of like a tragic, likable character like Boromir.
Yeah, for
well,
sure.
and these people are basically kind of half crazed from then on out, and some of them survive enough to go westward and hopefully be healed, and some of them, of course, are later killed off by Sauron. You know, there needs to be a body count and a cost to the actions of the narrative. Not to mention at the Last Alliance, where Isildur and Elrond and Círdan are basically the only people left standing.
Absolutely, I agree. I think that it can't really be a good show without both the good and the bad. It has to be a storyline where you want to scream at the television, you want to get sad, you cry with the main characters, you get involved, you have to get invested in their emotions. And in order to do that, you have to take the good with the bad.
Exactly.
I think that
What
was
do you think about character? What do you think, guys, about the characters' relationships with each other? Because we've got from the Lord of the Rings, we've got this idea that the elves are this one community who are always agree, who are always for good. But Second Age, first age more, but Second Age is still a period where changes exist. You got Celebrimbor who ousts Galadriel and Celeborn from Eregion. You got Amdir and I think Orofer who would still mourn the fall of Doriath and the second king slain. And you've got dwarves, etc. There should be this aspect where elves are less perfect, because one of the defining traits of Galadriel in the later writings is her ambition. She is ambitious, so she's wise, but she should be more ambitious than wise.
Yeah, I think we'll see a dark side to the elves as well. Yeah, and also we'll see the wounds, because everything that happened in the end, towards the end of the first age, is still there. It's still dormant. There's still so much that we haven't seen.
Anatar should exploit the maybe dormant rivalries between the Sindar and the Noldor, the Sylvan Elves, and not to mention the House of Fingolfin against Fëanor, against Finarfin, and so forth. You know, we should inflame those things, which, you know, I mean, these guys may have thought, okay, that all happened, but Morgoth is defeated. Let's all be friends now, and it's just pushed to the background.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in this, I think Círdan could act like the wise old dude. Even in the first age, Círdan is one of the only characters that really seems neutral. He is okay with everyone. When he comes, he doesn't oppose the Fëanorians. He gets saved by Celegorm, I think, and he then goes with the Gil-Galad to the Isles of Balar. So I think he could act as that old dude, wise, the Gandalf of this series.
I always try to think of Anatar as kind of wicked version of Gandalf, but yeah, sure.
Yes, Anatar could do this. I think Anatar would be more like Melkor after being released. You know,
That too. Yeah.
as Gandalf is all about being humble and being unrecognizable, whereas Anatar is all about being fair, being great, being the Lord of the Gifts.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I think that's been all summed up quite well. But just to wrap up now, because we are about an hour in, we'll start with Hen, and we'll go down the list. Which Elven character are you most excited for seeing in the Lord of the Rings show, and which Elven place / kingdom? Let's start with Hen.
Oh yeah. Okay. Oh, it's cool. The character, I think that's pretty easy. It's Celebrimbor. I love like complicated, messed up, conflicted characters and trick endings, and so Celebrimbor, yeah, that's a very cool character to see. I love the tragic characters in all of these properties, and it would be a really cool addition. I think that the conflict there with Galadriel and the idea that he kind of likes her, and a very, very interesting character. Really cool. In terms of place, I'm leaning towards Lindon for a couple of reasons. One is it has the potential for new visuals because it's by the sea, which we've never seen, never in this franchise. We've never seen the ocean. We've never really seen shore. And it's going to be Lindon is going to be a nice. It's going to be the elves at their height because it is the biggest kingdom of the time, and so it's going to be. Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. Everybody keeps talking about Numenor in terms of like impressive architecture, but the elves know their stuff as. Yeah.
I don't want to start that debate up again, but yeah, moving on to Enzo Bud now. Which character and place are you most looking forward to see?
In terms of characters, Gil-Galad and Elrond. I see stand by. They are the best ones to introduce every single aspect of this second age, and they have potential for being layered and complex in their own right, especially Elrond. In terms of place, I think Eregion would give us more new visuals than Lindon. Lindon it's the shores, but it's still Noldor in there. Eregion would give us something. When I remember when Legolas and the Fellowship passed through Eregion, he says that the Noldor he worked the stone. So I would like to see a more dwarvish or dwarven aspect to it.
Cool.
Yeah, Nikki?
Yeah, well, I agree with Imzo. I am looking forward to Galadriel the most, but also Gil-Galad, and actually I'm hoping we'll see a lot of Lothlorien because it is my favorite city of the elves of all time, and I would just love to see how it came to be what it is in the Lord of the Rings, and to follow Galadriel and Celeborn's journey through that, and with their daughter and all of that. That's what I'm the most excited about.
Indeed, and hopefully Morfid will, of course, hopefully show us that in quite a good light as well. Moving on to Penguin.
I'm gonna have to go with Celebrimbor here because I want to see an elf, laser focused on his craft. There's a little bit of hubris there. So preoccupied with whether or not he could, never thought to bother with the question of should he. I messed up that quote, but I think there's a lot that can be done with him. Not to mention manipulation by Sauron. There's the version of him where he has an unrequited love for Galadriel, which could make the dynamic of him then leading a revolt against her all the more interesting. And as for the Elvish realm, I'd say Region. You've got there's this conception of the elves, especially built up in the movies, of these forest living hippies, kind of. I mean, that's a little dismissive, but you got these guys that live in the forest, pretty much at one with nature. But instead, you have here we've got the high elves. These are the guys that built cities. They were the ones who taught men, traded with the dwarves, and all what they're not reclusive. They are very interested in the world and everything that's going on. And it just seems like such a much more dynamic elvish culture, and that's really what I want to see.
Yep, said quite well. And finally, talking to
Definitely think Galadriel and Celebrimbor are the most interesting subjects to think about. Will Celebrimbor love Galadriel? Will Celebrimbor rebel against Galadriel? Will he be the Lord of Eregion? And will they mix the forms of canon when it comes to Celebrimbor? Each of those are great questions, and as for Galadriel, there's plenty of different ways they can go there as well, but I think Celebrimbor is who I am most looking forward to.
great. And for mine, I think you guys have mostly wrapped up all the interesting characters like Celebrimbor, Gil-Galad, Galadriel, Elrond, etc. So I thought I'll go a different route for mine, and maybe I'd like to see Armdir and potentially Orifer / Thranduil. Seeing maybe, I know of course we'll probably see them a lot less than all the other characters you mentioned, but it would be interesting to see their part of Middle Earth and maybe add that little political aspect to the show as well, seeing we are kind of in the picture as well in this massive world, which is indeed true, and hopefully the show will be able to show that as well, because I think by having them in just a bit it would show the scale of Middle Earth and would probably help with world building as well. But that is probably around time for today's podcast. Firstly, thank you, Chen.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
A really, really special thanks to Enzo Bud for joining us for his first podcast. Thank you, my friend.
You're welcome.
You're really, really good. Of course, the lovely Nikki, thank you.
Thank you. It's been fun as always.
And luckily, I did get my contract out. I give Penguin a contract because he is a bit expensive to have on for the full podcast nowadays. So I'm paying him for about a 25-minute rate. So thank you, though, anyways.
You're welcome.
And finally, thank you, talking to you, my friend.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on. And again, to any viewers, go check my channel out and Nikki out. And of course, if you're watching this far, you really should be subscribed and you should have already liked the video.
I need to start doing that more often as well. But to all the viewers at home as well for sticking this far, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe until the next video, my friends, and podcast for them. Goodbye.